It's a beautiful night down here in the Washington area, and I'm really excited about tonight's readings. Hello, I'm Henry Crawford, and welcome to Poets versus the Pandemic. It's a series devoted to poets whose books have come out during this time of coronavirus and sheltering in place. Tonight, we are featuring Julia Story, who will be reading from her new book, Spinster for Hire, which was just published by the WordWorks. We'll also be hearing guest poets Judith Bowles and Margaret McKinnon. Before we begin, I want to thank the WordWorks and Cafe Muse for helping sponsor this series, and I want to thank each and every one of you for joining us tonight. Let's get a few things out of the way. First, and most importantly, if you want to purchase Julia's book, Spinster for Hire, please click on the green button below. Same goes for Judith Bowles' book, Unlocatable Source, and Margaret McKinnon's book, The Invented Child. The green button leads to links to all three of these books. So please feel free to go down there, purchase these books, and support these poets. And of course, if you'd like to follow all of our WordWorks readings, just click on the Follow tab in the upper right part of your screen. Now, if you want to ask a question of our poets while they're performing, you can click on the Ask a Question button right at the bottom of the screen. And you can do this while the reading is going on. And you can also read other people's questions, and you can vote on them the same way that you would like something on, say, Facebook. And so we can vote them up if you'd like, and we will try to get to a few of them if we have time. Also, remember that you are not on camera, so you don't have to worry about mics or cameras or what room you're in or any of that kind of thing. But please make use of the lively chat feature over here on the right to comment on the performances. Here's a couple more things. Please join us for our next Poets versus the Pandemic reading on June 10, 2020, where we're going to be featuring poet Francisco Aragon, author of the new book After Rubin. We are really putting together a great night of Latinx poetry that I'm sure you're going to enjoy. And please come back next week for our next Cafe News reading on Monday, June 1, 2020, where we're going to be featuring poets Tommy Blount and Finally, if you want to come back to enjoy this reading again, just click on the same link you used to get here. The reading will be archived. Oh, and you can sign up for all the readings I just mentioned just by going over to our channel, which is at crowdcast.io/wordworks, and I think I put a link for that in the chat. Okay, let me start by introducing Julia Story. Julia Story is the author of several acclaimed books, including Post Moxie, winner of the 2009 Katherine A. Morton Prize, and the Ploughshares John C. Zacharis First Book Award. The Trapdoor is another book of hers, as well as Julie the Astonishing, and her most recent book, Spinster for Hire. She has been awarded a Pushcart Prize and has appeared in many publications, including Ploughshares, the Paris Review, and the New Yorker. She is originally from Indiana and is coming to us tonight, however, from Massachusetts. So let me click her in. This is part of the job I have here. Let me click her in and say that here at PVP, I'm always looking for lines of hope during these days of the pandemic. And such a line appears near the beginning of her poem, Toad Circus, which just appeared in the New Yorker, where Story tells us, I wanted to draw a doorway to walk through, to get to the world of lilacs, purple, contagious green leaves, and no movement, but the steady, invisible breathing of flowers. So without any more from me, I invite Julia Story to draw us a doorway to walk through right here on our virtual stage. So here is Julia Story. Oh, and I pressed the wrong button as usual. Let me see. Yep, I go away, and so does Margaret. Go for it.
Hi, everyone. Greetings from Somerville, Massachusetts. Thank you so much to everyone who's tuning in, and thank you so much to Henry for setting up these readings for the new WordWorks authors. As you can imagine, it's a really difficult time to have a new book come out, so this has been really wonderful. And also, of course, thank you to the WordWorks and Cafe Muse for contributing to this reading series too, and just to the WordWorks for publishing really amazing books. So I am sitting in my office right now, my home office. My two dogs are right next to me. You can't see them. I just wanted to let you know there may be some noises from them, but that's all part of this whole remote experience, I guess. Yeah, so I'm just going to be reading from Spinster for Hire, my new book. And the first poem I'm going to read is the first poem in the book. And it's called The Pain Scale. You ask me every time I come to give you the definition of this thing I carry with me. So many days has gone beyond pain. A burning hand that takes me to sometimes even a trail of beauty, to dying trees covered in scaffolding, a map of crushed stuff at their feet. The longer I stay and look, the more the distant box opens, and I can warble or crawl toward it instead of just trying to sit in this chair. I don't know how to be here either, but the longer I make the path, the more lookouts appear. There is a skull with light in it, a holy shovel until I'm nailed again to the sky in my head, and we stand here together like clouds. So running through the book is a series of poems with the title Indiana Problem. And the next one I'm going to read, Toad Circus, which Henry just read a little excerpt from, is one of those poems. And I just wanted to say about the word problem in this series that it's not necessarily something bad or trauma. It's more just about childhood and its long series of unanswered questions, whether they're unasked or just not answered. That's sort of how I think of childhood, is 12 years or so of unanswered questions in a lot of ways. So this is the first Indiana Problem poem I'll read, Indiana Problem, Toad Circus. The day after my Toad Circus, the toads were all dead, crunchy and silent in their window well. I wanted to draw a doorway to walk through to get to the world of lilacs, purple, contagious green leaves, and no movement but the steady, invisible breathing of flowers. I knew I had to tell someone what I had done, so I first walked to the park and stayed there until dusk, sitting on the glider or in the middle of the rusty and dangerous merry-go-round. I can't remember which. When it was nearly dark, I walked home, certain that they were worried and maybe even out looking for me. When I got there, I saw them busy in the kitchen through the window, so I hid in the backyard until it was good and dark, a living thing on a swing set in the gloom, the attic in my head cracking open for the first time, and I went in. Indiana Problem, 3 dusks. Feet sort of on the ground, I walked through the silence of a clock radio, kid and dog voices, and some wind retrieving its stupidity, flinging it back into the dull summer neighborhood. The trees on the hulk were never more alive as they churned out pure green bird voices, their hearts inside out ruins, their eyes connected to roots that could speak to both the living and the dead. I was scared that Jesus might come out of a cave to make peace with me, a gentle stroll through the sleep-shaped universe, the fraction-shaped universe. Spinster for Hire. What's missing is where our longing is. Standing under the tree, there isn't any feeling. Invertebrates of feeling swim slowly away from me. I sat all winter and watched you from my window. The procession of cars, feet, an occasional darting creature was like a slow motion, winter-long moth parade. On my walls, I had nothing but a framed photograph of a gibbon and the painting made for me by the Russian. You don't need to know anything else about him except he was the Russian. When spring came, I moved. The rhododendrons were in bloom in their dark pathways of half-medieval air. Deep underground, bones turned to chalk. I packed all of my things into moldy boxes and boxes into the waiting truck. You all stood there and didn't help me, but it was all right. Now I live above the beauty parlor. The town tries to sleep again for the winter. If you look up, you can see me in my window, one spot of life in our hibernation, our long orchard of silence. This poem I'm reading it from my friend Heather Hughes, who's an amazing poet. It features Phil Collins. I guess it's not necessarily a positive poem about Phil Collins, but I do love him, especially in his Genesis years. And also in this poem, and like a lot of other poems in the book, there's livestock, there are sheep. Throughout the book, there are horses, cows, pigs, because most of the book was written when I was living in rural England with my partner. And so those things kind of seeped into the book. And the book is actually written, the dedication is to Remedy, which is Remedy Cottage, which is the house that we owned, that we lived in when we were there. Today's opening. On the top of the Pops from 1980, Phil Collins in his Hawaiian shirt dances awkwardly, lip syncing, his bald spot flashing pink and blue. The couch I just bought is already wearing out, and gray dust covers everything, even the sky and distant tangle of trees. Out the window, I watch a new lamb unfold onto bent legs. I feel a pulley in my chest whenever I look at her movement. Crumpled and blind, automatic. Her pupils are rectangular, like the pupils of all prey. I could hunt her if I wanted to. But my natural instinct is a long Formica counter with a row of harmless ladies stalking their feelings. Collapsing and stuck in their own black holes. Phil Collins, my flamingo in flight, my looped dancer of mediocrity. All I have is the external. Boys and girls on the greatest day of their lives dance and push each other to the stage as the camera swings up to blue lights before collapsing skin and young joy into me, their silent mannequin. So a lot of the Indiana Problem poems have a lot of 80s references, because that's when I grew up, the early 80s. So lots of TV shows, toys, food. This poem features the TV show Little House on the Prairie, which I was obsessed with. Yeah, so that's all I'm gonna say about that. Indiana Problem, year 1983. In one episode of Little House, the brother Albert gets addicted to morphine. Doc Baker tells him to puke, and he does, and then he's not addicted anymore. Even though after I watched it with Mom, I asked her if I could do drugs when I grew up, she said no. I knew I never wanted to go through what Albert did, desperate for his next fix in too short homemade overalls and feathered hair, barfing all over the bed. I used to keep myself up at night worrying about drug addiction in general, and also sexual intercourse, ghosts, skeletons, and the devil. I would convince myself that a skeleton was standing next to my bed. Sometimes I would see the white of a leg bone through one squinted eye with the thrill of hundreds of sparrows beating my skin, and I was the only one in the world who had ever been this afraid. I would get through the day dry-eyed and light with exhaustion before night came, with its ghost nurses and dry, rubbery corpses from Ripley's Believe It or Not. And in another little house, Laura gets lost in the hills and is cared for by some old man. When Pa finally finds her, the desperation to keep her that riots out of him froze me. That you could be that wanted, that someone could want to save you. Three summers. At the edge, just out of the frame, I see a monkey tail and part of a monkey foot. The rest of the photo shows a horse in a sport coat being led by a female hand. The dog called Plum trots toward me, alone on the road to Manor Farm. She joins me for a few yards, giving sideways glances, judging. Then she squeezes under the fence and runs through the field. In the distance, the other dog waits for her. My husband fell in love with his teacher and married her instead. I stood in the empty house and waited with the lights off. Then I went on the porch with the cicadas and dark August flowers. Bubbles rose in me over and over. Grief, I thought, finally, but it was joy, not marching or in a parade or with lights or giant eyes, like pollen descending and darkening, burying me. Doorway. First the terror like a far-off bone, the streets of veins igniting as I walked to the door, panic of another face close to mine, a face like my face. No matter how I try, it won't fall off or be lost. And the voiceless moment of eyes, a rush of birds, two things together on a plate, a lonely surf and turf, two dead things who never meet in real life, the prairie and the sea, two different butchers, blood darkening a hidden floor, elsewhere, gasps and a sodden net. Then time, a door slamming, makes a boat between us. And this is about my favorite game. Well, it's about other things too, but it's about my favorite board game when I was a kid, Mousetrap. Called Indiana Problem Mousetrap. Wrapped in an Afghan and playing Mousetrap, I worried that I wasn't giving enough attention to the stupider toys. Light bright with most of the pieces missing, life-size Barbie head smeared with red and blue, forever bruised and smiling, shoebox of rubber animals. Boredom was always a dim garden in the background, a place where twilight was described by adults. Ears stretched toward the opening notes of sitcoms. Eyes stretched toward the windows and the sketchy trees. Dark Hoosier sadness. The house was so close we could hear their forks and knives if we left the door open. I didn't plan the second kingdom, not exactly in the mind or the heart, but in the dullness between them. A waiting so long, it made another body in case this one got too lonely. Okay. I'm just going to read a few more. This is called Of Use. It was dark, and I tripped on the dog stairs on the way to the bathroom. The dog needs stairs to get on the bed because her legs are so short. I was in the basement, and I saw the rain hit the grass in the dark through the window, lit up by headlights. I was at worm level. As a woman, I'm closer to being an animal than a man is. The dog moved over in the bed so I could get back in. Closer to animals, I am more prone to Satan. I am more easily seduced by the things that cast shadows. It's how you know I'm not dead. A long time ago, and maybe even now, the gods did horrible things because they could. But even in the journey through purgatory, there is dead day and night. Friendly dead orators, mountainside rest, brooks, insane skies, green angels, fields of gentle monsters and their stories. And within the owl is the process to make its pellet, the capsule of the stuff it doesn't need, a little package of bones and fur that must be of some use to something. In the morning, I was still underground, but could leave if I wanted, could walk the sidewalks where most people seemed to be pregnant. The guy still had my coffee. I could stand for a long time and watch a horse in a field above ground. There was ground in the place I asked for, and in its way, it needed me. This is another Indiana Problem poem, sort of written in the style of John Yao, who's one of my favorite poets. His book, Edificios Sayonara, has probably influenced my work more than almost any book. I love that book. So sort of a homage to him. Indiana Problem after John Yao. In the photo of me outside the airport, I'm wearing pink. Glasses, skirts, woven belt, shoes. The tree I touch is not wearing leaves, only the pale green light of future leaves. Together we are a statue that represents the end of childhood as we know it. See how the braces glint in the sun, The eyes move cementward. Behind the camera, there is no love, only a desire to end each moment before it arrives. All of us together, me, tree, camera, moment, are in this box. Even you, the hands that put it away and forgot it, are inside these bodies we make. The one that remembers while the other moves toward the disappearing flame. So I'm just going to read one more poem. Thank you again so much for listening. And yeah, I look forward to hearing the next reading. Moth. I took a long walk to the end of the arm, to the lighthouse. People don't live in them anymore, but a man did live in this one. I say he was a man, I say he was half man, half rabbit, a sadder but shorter, and he couldn't jump. He just reminded me of a rabbit. All night the light swept over the black water like God saying, here's what I have for you. And I didn't like it, so I looked at the gray wood floors specked with salt and dirt. The man didn't have anything to look at but the windows, so he looked out. I took a hidden staircase back to the earth, and I swam a few feet in the dark until I was tired. When I made my way back down the arm, it was many months later, and no one could see me because I had turned part moth. When I went back to my house and lived the rest of my days near the spines of the people who came looking for me, I hid in the walls, white and dusty. There was no one to hear me say it, and there's no voice to say it with. I was loved. Right, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Julia. What a wonderful set. And I really like those evocative poems of your childhood in the 80s. Bill Collins and Genesis. I thought you had to be as old as I am to like that band. So that's really great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And if anyone has questions, you can use the Ask a Question tab and ask questions of Julia and the rest of the poets, and we're going to try to take care of them at the end. But so we'll see. So we'll be seeing you again later on, Julia.
Okay.
Let me. There we go. All right. Okay. Let me introduce Judith Bowles. Judith is the author of 2 collections of poetry, The Gatherer in 2014. And her 2019 book, The Unlocatable Source. She has been poet in residence at the Bloedel Reserve on Bainbridge Island. Her poems have appeared in Gargoyle, the Innisfree Journal of Poetry, Better Than Starbucks, and the Cobalt Review. She's also a proud member of the Surrey Street Poets Group. So let me get her on this. Let's see if there we go. This is always a little trick getting people on. There you are, Judy. So let me say that the unlocatable source is filled with rich imagery that Judith draws from her work in the garden. So I took special interest in this line from her poem, White Morning Light, where the speaker says, all evidence of the world as it lives in its backyard, so full of fragrance, it throbs as if trying to speak. So here is Judith Bowles, and we will ask this poet to speak in that rich fragrance of the imagination that throbs. So here is Judith Bowles, and I shall depart back into cyberspace temporarily. Judith, you're on.
Wonderful, and they're compelling, and they are unusual and filled with surprise. I love the problem idea that you work with in so many of your poems and your childhood. It's wonderful. I'm going to read a couple of poems tonight, and the first one I wrote in Key West. And in Key West, those of you who have been there probably know this, and it's rather famous. Because Elizabeth Bishop wrote a poem of roosters that wander the streets as well as the chickens, and they wander the sidewalks and the streets. And they have been there for a long time, for generations. And some many years ago, cockfighting was a very popular sport. And cockfighting was usually done to the death. Two roosters were put in a pit, and they were put against each other, and they fought. And they were trained to fight, and they were particularly raised to be fighters. And they fought to the death. And by the way, the pit that they were put in was called the cockpit. I thought that was interesting because that's what pilots go in. So I don't know if which came first, the cockpit of the pilot or the cockpit of the roosters. But at any rate, this was a blood sport. And as I walked around Key West and I saw the roosters, I thought about their ancestors. Key West rooster on Bahama Street. And the auburn rooster stood on the corner in the alley, waiting. He raised one foot in the air, scratched the ages-old dirt, getting ready for what? For wind, against which he shut his eyes and lowered his head into stillness, so utterly still that he seemed to grow solid, something solid housing feathers grown wild like children let free all at once, a swarm come to life under the wing of the wind, as if he were saying his life, as if he were showing what had come before, long, long before this March day in the 21st century, as if he remembered being thrust toward another like himself, for something beyond his hoard, his beak new to hammer, his feet to claw softness he had learned to dig toward. Then came the stillness. He strutted around and was lifted. This poem that I will read has surprised me very much because I was sort of happy when the 70s ended. I didn't think that they were a great decade. And so I didn't think I would ever be praising the 70s, but never say never. So here it goes. All in. In the 70s, things were so good, we could laugh at bigotry as if it were just an act. It was Archie Bunker representing an endless joke, which everyone got but him. And this made the gag richer and deeper. He smoked a cigar when he was sure the cliche he believed was true. And he puffed it past all possibility and whaled up his eyes at the ignorance of Edith, of Gloria, of Meathead. And you may remember how we laughed. We were all in on the joke, and it was a good one that could never come true. So thanks for being here. Thanks for WordWorks for doing this, for Henry for doing it, and for all the wonderful poets.
Thank you so much, Judith, and two marvelous poems that really take us back and also take us forward. And we shall, again, you can ask questions out there, people who are enjoying this. You can ask questions of Judith or Julia. And now I shall bring on our third poet of the night, Margaret McKinnon. Oh, and I pressed the wrong button again. There you are. You've been here before. Okay, here is Margaret McKinnon, and I got to, all right. This is, okay. Okay, so you were here before, and sorry that I sort of popped you in and popped you out, but this is such as the vagaries of this kind of broadcast. Okay, Margaret McKinnon. Let me introduce her. Margaret McKinnon's work has appeared in many journals, including Poetry, Poet Lore, and the New England Review, among others. McKinnon has received several scholarships and residencies as poet and teacher. She has received many awards and honors. Her first book, The Invented Child, received the Gerald Gable Book Award and won the 2014 Literary Award in Poetry from the Library of Virginia. Her chapbook, Naming the Natural World, won the Sow's Ear Poetry Prize in 2018. Among the many beautiful lines in The Invented Child, I was struck by a simple exhortation in the middle of one of her poems called The Little Thumbkin. And this is a kind of little, small, plain line that sometimes just leaps out of the page. The speaker in this poem asks us to follow the unexpected course of love. So let me ask Margaret McKinnon to take us on that unexpected journey through her poetry and let her go. Okay?
Yeah.
Go for it.
Boop. Thanks so much, Henry, and thank you for letting me be here tonight. I'm thinking a lot about what we've been missing in this time, and one of the things I'm missing is an opportunity to see art in museums. So I'm going to start with a poem about an artist I love. This is called For Grant Wood. And there's an epigraph from Wallace Stevens, "The trees are mended." For Grant Wood. A shy man seeks perfection in his art. Across vast acres, color and shape of tidiness, Iowa's unruly grass submits, blade by blade. The blue of mother's dishes tints the sky. Across vast acres, color and shape of tidiness, sloping rows and rectangles piece a new land. The blue of mother's dishes tints the sky. Like a black quilt tied with loops of green, sloping rows and rectangles piece the new land. The reassuring fields of corn unfold like black quilts tied with loops of green. Under the artist's alchemy, the reassuring fields of corn unfold. Sweet clouds hover like the hands of God. Under the artist's alchemy, even winter's leaden skies grow bright. Sweet clouds hover like the hands of God as the 30s skylines and red lines disappear. Even winter's leaden skies grow bright. A yellow hill rises like the belly of a woman ripe with child as the skylines and red lines disappear. Iowa's unruly grass submits, blade by blade. A yellow hill rises, and the shy man finds perfection in his art. The other poem I'm going to read is based on another thing I miss, which is the opportunity to travel. So this poem came out of the years that I spent living in Japan. It's based on a traditional Japanese story, which is sometimes translated as The Crane Wife or The Grateful Crane. It's called Folktale. He knows she must have been a bird. That same white crane he saved returned to flight. And now she has returned to him as wife. At night, he brings his face near hers to watch the unexpected sheen, white on white, her skin against the pillow. And when she slowly combs her tangled morning hair, her lifted arms seem to him like wings. Once he found a feather on the stair. Her husband is to her the sea. He tastes of salt. His unwashed hair a net that holds an ancient briny catch. In sleep, she breathes him deep and flies. She sees the coast, sees the way the sun breaks waves to shards of purple, gold and rose. She sees the squares of planted rice, serene beneath a muted glaze. She finds a perch within the darkness of the trees. They love their simple life, their house, a flowering branch, a lacquered box. Life comes to life when juxtaposed. Each meal they share seems an emblem of the past. A bit of rosy fish curls shyly on a tray. A boiled custard in a plain white cup nearly overflows like the moon's white light inside a narrow room. They drink their tea in somber bowls, neither green nor gray. Like two old friends, they tell each other tales, but never once their own. The startled hunter, wedded to his prey, the wounded bird, would-be wife. But should a traveler someday pass beyond their gate, the scene he'd see could bring to mind a half-remembered song, could bring to mind a master's inky wash, where in a single tree, a stone, a stream, find a home within an emptiness. The painting's untold story feels like home. Thank you. Thanks, Henry.
Thank you so much. What a wonderful reading. And so now let me bring everybody back. Let's get all of our poets up here. Here is Julia, and here is the incredible Judith Bowles. So here are all of our poets. We have one question in the doc here. Please, and now is the time, if you would like to ask any of these poets questions, please feel free to hit that Ask a Question button. But let's see if we can field this first question. And you know, I think this is directed to Julia, but I mean, almost all of them could be, it could be directed to all three of them. This is from Don Illich, who asks, I like the way you combine imagination with childhood experience. How did that come about in your work? Julia, I think that's in the first instance aimed at you. Oh, hang on, I gotta unmute you.
Oh, sorry.
It's the old unmuting thing.
I've been writing poetry for a long time, and I think for a lot of poets, maybe their earlier poems are about their childhood, but for some reason I never wrote about childhood until now that I'm in my mid-40s. So it's actually really fun and weird going back there. And as I've talked to my siblings about the subjects of some of the poems, like, a lot of them are not about an event that took place in a linear way. They're just like bits and pieces of several different events glued together. And yeah, so I think they're definitely more imagination than history for sure. And of course I made stuff up too, because
Make stuff up.
So it was a really interesting experience, and not because the book overall I feel like is about the persona is a woman who's sort of on the outside of things. I wasn't necessarily expecting there to be this childhood element, but to me it felt like the childhood, the stories about childhood seemed like an important part of the story of this woman's life. So. Very good.
Judith, you were talking about, you got into the 70s in your poem, in one of your poems. What brought you back into the 70s? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, it was the show itself. It was All in the Family. I had watched a series of those fairly recently, and that's really a brilliant piece of work. And it's a brilliant piece of work about a family dynamic and about this character of Archie Bunker, who we all loved and hated. I mean, we loved him, and he was a lovable oaf. And it was so interesting because how could you possibly have him now? There's no way. And it was just, it's a good chance to understand the enormous arc that happens in life, how things change so dramatically in our culture. And so that was to me, I cherish those shows at the same time as you do sort of something in amber that's under glass that cannot be again.
Right. Margaret, you go back into your childhood from time to time. I know there's a poem that deals with discrimination on a beach that I've always loved of yours. What brings you back into your childhood? What is your way of going back there?
I think there's a certain freedom in going back to your childhood the farther away you are from your childhood. And I would also say that I think some people who write poetry don't always have to worry that their family members are going to read what they write, even if you're a novelist. So there's a sort of freedom in thinking, well, this is the way I remember it, and these are the things that marked me. And as Judith was saying, it's so interesting to think about how what we remember, and Julia said too, what we remember and how we see it so differently decades later, and thinking about why this detail or this insight has stayed with us.
Great. Great. Okay, I don't see any other questions down there in the question queue, but I want to thank all three of you for coming out and sharing your wonderful poetry with us tonight. And I will now, and please bear with me as I have to work these cameras and mics. Thank you so much. So I'm going to take you all off, and I'm going to. There we go. So long, Margaret, and Julia Story. So long.
Bye. Thank you.
And so please join us for the next Poets versus the Pandemic on Wednesday, June 10, 2020. And we're going to be featuring at that one poet Francisco Aragon and his book After Rubin. And please also join us on June 1, 2020, when Cafe Muse will feature poets Tommy Blount and Molly Spencer. And let me thank Julia Story, Judith Bowles, Margaret McKinnon once again for a great reading. And let me thank the WordWorks and Cafe Muse for their sponsorship of this series. Thank you all, and stay safe.